Today we have another fabulous guest in Bill Scott.
I think, when you can take an idea and capture hearts and minds and get that into the public discourse, into culture, and that's when you're getting that real earned media.
CEO of Droga5, one of the most well-renowned, well-regarded, respected agencies in the world, frankly.
Started at Droga5, we're very small, we're only 20, 25 people, and a real blend of culture, quite senior, very, very, junior creative teams straight out of college. We're keen to nurture is that playfulness, to break down all form of hierarchy, and I think curiosity and playfulness, and albeit a little bit of mischief, kind of is a great equalizer in that sense.
Very calm, quite steely, determined, love the industry. Today, you're in for a treat. What got Bill there, what keeps him there, what keeps him motivated and interested in one of the most turbulent times for the industry and in the world.
So Mark talked about the turbulence that's currently going on. And of course, we are approaching year end as well. So how is it all going? How's 2024 been for you?
It has been a turbulent year. I think that's fair. I think that's a very apt adjective. I'd actually say it's been a better year than last year. I think 2023, if I look back, was particularly tough. I think that everything that was happening in the world last year and the war, the inflations, it was a real perfect storm. I feel like we've seen a little bit more confidence come back into the market this year. Certainly we as an agency in 2024 have been it's been one of our busiest years in terms of output. I often say, agencies are at their happiest when they're making work, when they're busy and putting work into the world. That's always a good barometer. So in that sense, it's been a quite satisfying year in terms of output. But to your turbulence, there's been a lot of change. I think, there's been a lot of change internally. We've had people leave the business. We've got new people coming into the business. So navigating that change, it's a good test of all your kind of leadership reflexes, to say the least.
Yeah, for everybody. Now, you mentioned the word confidence, and I said in the trailer, sort of calm, steely. My sense is you do have, it's like an inner, quite calm confidence. So I'm just gonna ask, how do you keep that going through this turbulence? How do you stay quietly confident as a motivator? I imagine working for you was quite nice in terms of you project confidence. So tell us a bit about that.
There's definitely moments I have self-doubt. I think, I internalize, your inner voice, you're internalizing a lot. There are certainly times when you are scared, for want of a better word, and your confidence is low. There are certainly unknowns and there's certain things that are beyond your control, which, you can't project that confidence all the time. Part of our job as leaders is to breathe certainty into the business as much as you can. But there are times when you're dealing with uncertain variables which are beyond your control. So that's a tension you have to wrestle. I think with the benefit probably as more and more of experience and the benefit of the overnight test and a long walk and perspective that allows you to contextualize things and try and keep that outer calm and that outer confidence. But then equally, I think there's, especially in this environment where you are navigating so many variables, it's the best policy is honesty and just being honest with yourself, honest with people, honest with the circumstances, and kind of sharing that problem. I think if you try and internalize it all to yourself, that only accentuates the pressure on yourself. So whether you're sharing it with a peer, your boss, the issue, or with a client, I think just facing into it often helps diffuse some of that tension. And out of that, actually, you can weirdly draw quite a lot of confidence and self-belief from.
Bill, I love how you talked of some of those coping mechanisms, whether it's sort of going out for a walk in the evenings and such. And I think in this environment, one of the things that probably is a skill that you've had to both muster and I dare say master, but I'm sure ever working on, is the role of resilience. And that's the ability to be resilient personally as well as at an organization level. And as part of our research, we heard that some of that resilience that you learned came from some of your early days when you were in boarding school. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about the role of how boarding school has helped you to build your resilience.
Yes, that was a journey. I'm an only child, and both my parents were anaesthetists. They were very busy people. And I think that by the age of 9, they decided with their schedule and their hecticness and sometimes being on call, perhaps boarding school was the best place for me. And at that age, at 10 years old, who am I to know better? Of course, the first term, the first year, I was hugely homesick, hugely. And that was a real test of your mettle looking back. You took it as rejection. Why have I been sent off? So there's definitely some soul searching there. But one of the most powerful and things I'm most grateful for out of that boarding school experience was friendship, and the power of friendship, the power of the relationships. Many of my friends I made, at the age of 10, my best friends now. They're being, my best friend he was my best man at my wedding. We've had this kind of nearly 40-year relationship, and that's a huge source of strength. I suppose, especially being an only child, not having brothers and sisters, having such closeness and richness in that friendship is a real kind of powerful kind of outlet. I'm very, very grateful for that. And then I suppose the other thing, boarding school, which was good in terms of resilience, is it keeps you busy. Boarding school, there's barely a moment where you're not moving, you're not running to a football match or some swimming practice or to the classrooms or whatever. So I think that was a really good tempo, and you took that energy and that tempo into university, and then I suppose kind of into your working life. And again, I think that's probably set me in good stead in terms of trying to maybe dealing with, especially today, the pace of work that we work at and the resilience that you have to deal with.
Friendship and staying busy, two fundamental things. It's pretty tough. It's pretty tough at the top, and we'll come back to that being a CEO. But before we do, we should reflect on join the dots from that 10-year-old to where you are today. I suppose specifically, how and why did you get involved in advertising?
Well, as I said, my parents are both doctors. There was no pressure or expectation whatsoever for me to go into medicine. I spent a lot of time at hospitals and operating theatre messes, and even at a young age, I think I was about 4 or 5 years old, my dad got called in for an emergency. A baby had swallowed a 50p piece, so he thought it'd be fun for me to come along and put the gown up into the greens and go into surgery. And one cut of that knife, and I was on the floor. I was out like a light. So I think very quickly we knew that medicine was not going to be my calling. And then by default, I think I came out of school. I did a degree in business studies. The world of commerce and the world of business, I suppose, as a young 10-year-old self, intrigued me. But not really knowing particularly where I was going to go. I think by default, it was stockbroking back in the day then, or fund management or banking. So I was exploring that corridor. Out of university, I then took the initiative to do the kind of regulatory exams, the FSA exams, and because that was a kind of table stake you needed to do. And it was in that moment I was in an exam hall, sitting surrounded by these junior bankers, these first-year graduates, and there I was working through this 100-question multiple choice, all about the financial regulations, and I had a bit of an epiphany then. I just thought, I just can't see myself spending the rest of my life working in this environment, and I came out of that slightly disillusioned, and went on to meet a very good friend of mine, from school for a pint, and just reflecting on that. And he was in a similar stage. He was just graduated, and as it happened, literally we were looking at the TV, and there was this brilliant advert on TV. It's actually for Audi A8, the man on the moon. How they put the man on the moon was the use of aluminium space frame, and we both said, great ad. And then we kind of looked at each other, advertising. Why didn't I think of that? I wonder how they do that. And then very, very luckily, had an old school friend who happened to be at Saatchi's, and went for a beer with him, who gave me some tips. And then you start getting the applications out and knocking on doors, and eventually, actually, I got a work experience, a 2-week work placement at at Saatchi & Saatchi back in Charlotte Street, back in the day, 80 Charlotte Street, working under the tenure of Adam Crozier and Tamara Ingram. And 2 weeks became a month became 3 months, and then that turned into a job offer. And now I cut my teeth for working on Procter & Gamble, Sunny Delight, Telling Kids Orange. And then in January 2000, I did that about 3 years at Saatchi's. In January 2000, I went into BBH, where I was there for 12 and a half, nearly 13 years. And yeah, very, very grateful for seeing that pub, seeing that Audi in the pub moment. And I fell in love with it from day one, literally week one at Saatchi & Saatchi. The environment, the hustle, the going down to a creator review, seeing the art of possible, that kind of blend of commerce and business with creativity. I just love that whole intersection.
Oh, you're speaking right to our hearts there, Bill. And funny enough, I think Mark and you have had a similar sordid sort of run-in with the finance industry in that context. And I can clearly see both of you are grateful for having either not started it or for having forged great careers in our space.
Yeah, Bill. So just that story, Bill, is that I was destined for a career in finance. I deferred it for a year.
Okay.
To do a sports sabbatical thing at university in the Students' Union. And during that year, my graduate job disappeared in a puff of smoke. And I was made redundant before I'd even started. I've not even set foot in the building. But I always feel like I was saved from that. Oh. So you and I are kindred spirits in that regard. So Richie, back to you.
No, but look, I love that thought, and clearly, as you say, an epiphany moment when you're watching great advertising, and I think at the heart of great advertising is actually pulling at those heartstrings, and I think that's probably what it did for you, and then lured you in all that time later. But before we get too deep, one of the stories that you've told in the past is of a police chase and sort of a blue teeth incident, and absolutely legendary when I heard it back. So please, can you recite that for all our listeners here today?
That's probably the real reason why my parents sent me to boarding school. So again, a lot of time while there at the hospital. I had a lot of free time in my hands. I think I was about 7, 8, or 9. The police incident was I'd just come back from a little, maybe it was a little bit of French exchange. And I bought all these French bangers that you could buy in France quite easily off the shelf. These little firecrackers, literally lit them in, and they're hilarious. They're like, kind of like fireworks, little bangs. And I decided to fill my suitcase with these things. I spent all my pocket money on these, and we thought it was, some friends, me and some friends locally went into the local woods and just lined them all up, and then decided to set off this ridiculous series of mini explosions to great hilarity, which then drew consternation from the local neighbors going, "What is that? What are those noises? Is that gunfire?" And then, heaven forbid, before we knew it, there were police and dogs and everywhere. So that was and I'll never forget the moment being at home when the phone rang and my parents picked up the phone and they said it's the local police. And that was a long evening. And then similarly, the blue teeth incident. My parents, as doctors, often were given various merchandise and mugs and merch from the various kind of medical suppliers. And one little product they brought home was these little tablets where you put into your mouth, and it showed you where all your teeth decay was, or all your, where you're not brushing your teeth properly. And it did that by turning, your kind of decay into quite, vivid colors. So dentists were kind of trialing this product, and for some reason they tasted quite nice. So I took a penchant for them for all the wrong reasons, and then took them took a batch of these to school. And it happened to be the last day of the school, when there was a big performance and we're all meant to be singing. And then half the school, when they started singing, obviously had blue teeth. And again, I got in a lot of trouble for that. So mischief and flying a little bit too close to the sun there.
The playfulness, which obviously is a bit of a ... into working in advertising, engaging, humorous, unexpected. So maybe you were wired for it. Tell us a bit about what playfulness means in your career.
Well, I think one of the things I was struck by when I joined literally Charlotte Street in the late 90s, what was that playfulness. Absolutely not at the expense of professionalism. It's about getting the work out. But there was this kind of blend of different talent, the alchemy of different talent from different backgrounds, all with a shared passion and shared purpose to do great work. But there was a camaraderie from day one. There was this kind of, this really lovely kind of atmosphere, part banter, part curiosity, part fascination with either a great film or a great bit of music reference or a latest exhibition. And I think that's a sign often of, that's what makes agency life so very interesting. You can come in on Monday and you're talking to a creative team and you hear about what they saw at the weekend, whether it's a photography exhibition or a show or a latest bit of thing. There's a real kind of creative currency and yearning for creativity, which I think is quite special in an agency. And part of that, I think, then kind of manifests itself in a playfulness or in the culture. And I remember when I started at Droga5, we're very small. We're only 20, 25 people. And a real blend of culture, quite senior, and myself and David Kubels, very, very junior, a lot of, junior creative teams straight out of college. And, one of the things we were keen to nurture is that playfulness, to bring us together, to break down all form of hierarchy. We wanted a very flat organization. And I think curiosity and playfulness and albeit a little bit of mischief kind of is a great equalizer in that sense. As one boss once remarked to me, you drink together, you stay together. And again, I'm not saying, but those Thursday evening pub drinks or after work drinks on a Friday, there was a kind of camaraderie. And I think that's something that's very special that is unique to agency life.
I've never heard that phrase before. Those who drink together, stay together. But as you said it, it just kind of made a lot of sense to me. And beyond the drink element, I think what you're describing there is a sense of collaboration and culture and being in it together ultimately. And I do fear that either client side or agency side today, given the way in which we work, we may well have lost that a little bit. And I mean, I've been in a range of client side organizations over the past 12, 24 months. And, sometimes I see it in kind of, the phrase that springs to mind is ghost town. And I do fear from my early days when I started my career to what we have today in this new hybrid way of working, the pros and cons are clearly apparent for all to see. But I wonder, in a creative context such as yours, how do you view the nature of work and the changing nature of work? And how do you believe that you can, drink together, stay together, philosophy embodied in this hybrid way of working?
No, it's a very good question. I think, this kind of journey we've been on since COVID and the migration back into the office, I think you definitely feel a steps change this year. I think, our office is in Liverpool Street. I take the Central Line every morning. It feels fuller. Do you know what I mean? You just feel like there's, certainly Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I think there, certainly is a work pattern in our agency. Those 3 days are very, very full. And, I think we're seeing that with clients now as well, particularly those 2 days, if not Monday to Thursday. I think the key thing, is still how you maintain and even go even further to invest in those rituals to bring people together, to build that sense of community. Whether, every week on a Tuesday morning, we bring the agency together just for kind of house notices, status, what's happening over a cup of coffee. Every Thursday evening, it's Thirsty Thursdays, and we crack open a beer at the office, and there's some music playing. There may be an extraordinary thing like someone's leaving party, and then we'll all push onto the pub. There's a WhatsApp group called The Bell, which is named after a pub near us, which I'm not on for obvious reasons, but there's definitely a kind of shorthand for people of who's going to be down at The Bell on any given Thursday or evening. And And then I just try to think through those pattern of rituals you can really keep going to bring people together. Just last week we do our annual Thanksgiving agency celebration, which is a kind of ritual we've done, which began at Droga, New York, when there were 7 people back in 2006 when they first started up. And David Droga began this ritual of, it's called potluck, and everyone in the agency cooks a dish. Someone's on turkey, someone's on potatoes, someone's on veg, someone's on gravy. And you bring that dish to the agency, and then in the afternoon, take it off and have a nice meal together. And they continue to do this every year as the agency grew from 7 people to 50 to 100 to 500. When I joined Droga London, it was November time. I thought, that's a great idea. We're going to nick that and we'll make it our own. So every year, and I did it last year, I cook a couple of turkeys for the agency, and then we have a spreadsheet. Someone brings in a respective dish. We come in, we do an end of year company meeting, a review of the year, and we dress up, obviously, being formal and British, and try and make the theme black tie. But then critically, we sit down and have a really nice meal in the early evening and celebrate the year and give thanks for the year. And that's just a ritual. It's a really nice ritual. Everyone's got a bit of skin in the game, but brings people together. And I think it's things like that. You've got to really double down investing in culture. And that's, it's the space between us and the space between our relationships. So I think if you can create those moments and that kind of shared experience can really pay dividends.
Love that. And just as an aside, I don't know, Rich, if you know Kevin Mathers, but he's obviously joined Accenture, and he dresses up as Darth Vader at the Christmas party, which has a slightly different effect.
Okay.
Watch out for that one. Anyway, so you mentioned David Droga. We were very fortunate to have Sir John Hegarty on a few weeks ago, and one of my reflections on that is that where are the icons of the advertising industry, and perhaps David Droga himself is one of those.
Really?
So give us an insight to the role that somebody like that plays in the industry and within a company in terms of inspiration and creativity. Give us a bit of an insight. I mean, the name is above the door.
Yes, I think. Having worked at BBH myself and worked for a founder-owner business with their names above the door, and having working very closely with Nigel Bogle and John Hegarty and then latterly David Droga, you're very lucky in that, I've been certainly very lucky to work with them firsthand directly, whether it's a creative review, whether it's an end of year company meeting, you're kind of, whether it's a catch up on Audi or an issue or going through or a Waitrose review or working with David on the pitch and the night before in Paris, you get to really work with them closely, which is obviously an enormous privilege. The thing I suppose you draw down on most is that sense of belief. I think that kind of, there is a swagger and audaciousness that John and Nigel and David brings to a room. There is a presence when they walk into a room with a client. And somehow they've got that magic where whatever they say is obviously very choiceful, but incredibly smart, very, very insightful, and that just instills belief into you within the team, the other team members in the room. But it also just that belief kind of just breathes into the work. I think one of the things that really struck me, the ambition that David has on any given brief and prepared to leave no stone. And you can have a spark of an idea and you go, is that possible? And you go, well, of course it is. And there's the kind of absolutely unconditional belief in the art of the possible. I think that's that's infectious when you have that belief and you kind of that boundaryless kind of thinking. I think that's obviously infectious for an agency.
Bill, you talk about it being a privilege to have worked with and for in organizations, the ones that you have, the iconic organizations that you've worked within. And there's so few of us who actually do get to work with such amazing people, like the people you've mentioned, David Droga in particular. It must be really thrilling and exciting. And as part of that, when you kicked off your journey at Droga, as you say, it's a 20-person team. Today, it's an absolute powerhouse of creativity. And, you have won some incredible clients and work with incredible clients. And I don't know if you can ever put your finger on a magic sauce, but I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about what you think is in the mix, in the potion, that enables you to attain clients the way that you have and keep them.
Well, pitching is its own art form. I often say pitches can bring the best out of an agency or the very worst out of an agency. There's always the flight pattern of what's happening day to day in the business. Client business should always be the absolute priority. And then a big opportunity comes in, or a big pitch, and you go, right, how are we going to create the team, the capacity, the conditions to really do this? And I think when an agency is humming and there's that kind of synchronicity and everyone's kind of, a big pitch can land, and very, very quickly the people, the team just mobilizes itself. They want to work on that pitch. So from the get-go, you've got a good energy and a good momentum. And so you want that kind of confidence going into a pitch. Then I think it's when you've got that, and there is that kind of energy and chemistry within the agency team, that clients feel it. From the first chemistry meeting, I think that chemistry meeting, if it's really good, can often set the tone for the rest of the process. You can sometimes win at chemistry if you really get it right, and and if you land a provocation or a bit of thinking in that chemistry that feels really, really right, and you're getting resounding feedback, that's obviously infectious energy. And then you're off to go, and before you know it, you're doing great scripts, great work off the back of that, and then your first tissue meeting with a client or the next presentation, you feel like you're just making huge strides forwards. And I think the best pitches I reflect have had those ingredients. Best pitches, you make clients really move in a pitch, either through chemistry or through the work. I've had pitches where we made clients absolutely bellyache with laughter. We've had pitches where we've moved clients to tears. So I think those are the pitches I reflect on, where you can just really, everything just clicks, and there's a click with the client, and walking out the door on the final pitch, that's a home run. Conversely, there are pitches where you get it wrong, and there's misinterpretations on the brief, there's misalignment on interpretation, there's different versions of interpretation on the strategy and how the kind of work it's manifesting itself, and those kind of fragments, that fragmentation then gets only worse and worse, and the danger is you bring that into the room for a client, and clients can see it a mile off. So, I think you've got to try and obviously manage against that, and also hold yourself accountable. So when you feel like that's potentially happening, you got to pull the emergency cord and go, right, this is a reset. So, I don't know my stats, so I don't know the agency stats in terms of win rates, but I think those are the pitches, which are, where you can harness those conditions. And then after that, I think often pitches where you've done really well, the clients actually are making and buying the work that you put into that pitch, which I think is probably rarer and rarer these days. But again, that first 100 days of the relationship, you're straight into be of the bang, and the first, all eyes and all energies focused onto that first iconic, first shared piece of work that you put out into the world, and then hopefully after that lays down the foundations for a longer relationship.
So, Bill, when you described that, particularly the bit where it was going well, hairs on the back of my neck, because it reminded me of the very best things about working in around marketing and advertising, the hunger and desire and ambition of creative agency or any agency, and the being moved. But of course, it doesn't always go well. And I'm reminded when you talk about Roger Federer, he gave a honorary degree recently. You may have seen it, where he talked about winning 80% of his matches, but he only won 54% of the points. You can be very best in the world, but only marginally win more points than you lose. And his message is, a point is just a point, and then clean mind, get on back to the next point. So I suppose what's behind my question is, you will have had disappointments, you will have had setbacks, I mean, specifically in pitches, but also more generally. So, and it links to what you said about resilience before, but yeah, what's Bill's bounce back ability plan?
Good question. Well, I think, facing into learnings. I think, the Nile is a river in Egypt. You can easily sweep under bad processes and confine that to the history books and not really face into it. I think being able to a measure of accountability and looking around the room. There are times in pitch debriefs where you've sat down with your leadership team and you kind of do a bit of post-mortem and you've got to face into those learnings and kind of hold your hand to the fire a little bit. So, and it's the old kind of definition insanity, keep on doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So I think, if on a series of losses or tough experiences or things aren't going right, you've got to kind of really face into that issue. And then I suppose to that end, also taking shared accountability on that. You yourself aren't going to solve it. Agency life we're a blended team sport, multidiscipline, whether it's with account management or strategy or design or creative or production, there's a knock-on effect on everything. So I think kind of being able to, create a safe environment where you can have those honest conversations as to where we've gone wrong and kind of face into those about how we can do things differently is often a quite a helpful exercise.
Well, and related to that bounce back ability, of course, there's the close cousin saying would be nothing ventured, nothing gained. And therefore, risk, and whether that's creative risk, whether that's career risk, is all a part of life. And I'm sure to get to where you've got to in your position, you've had to be able to take a few risks in your career. And I just wondered if you've got any sort of personal frameworks or way you think about risk taking, and particularly about how you plot your career to have got to where you are.
No, I think risk is in creativity. You want to embrace risk. You want to try and do new work and break new ground, and often that involves an element of risk. I think in terms of an agency environment, it's up to us as leaders to try and create that safe environment, that permission to take risks, but obviously not recklessly. There's got to be clear guardrails against that. I think in terms of my own personal framework, you're right. There are times where I've kind of had to take leaps into the unknown. I remember at the time vividly when I was obviously very flattered. I was invited to take the CEO-ship at Droga5. I was only 2.5 years into my MD-ship at Grey London. So it felt a little bit premature. I wasn't sure myself if I was ready to take on my first kind of CEO role. And I suppose having done 3 years at Saatchi's, nearly 13 years at BBH, my inclination was to stay longer at Grey. And at the time in Grey London, we were building a good momentum and doing some great work and winning some big pitches. And, I was enjoying it. We were thriving and it was a really good energy. So it felt counterintuitive to walk away from that, because you kind of go, there's a big element of unknown. As I said, Droga5 was only 20, 25 people. It wasn't firing on all cylinders. So, there was a kind of big period of reflection on, am I crazy to take this job? David Droga is a pretty persuasive guy. You spend some time with him and you quickly work out you'd be crazy to walk away from this. But then I think also was, right, how there are risks here, but how do I de-risk it? What are the inputs or the elements or the conditions or ingredients that I can do to give myself as much self-belief as possible? Obviously, part of that was my creative partner. As soon as I knew that we were going to be able to work with David Kubush, and David Kubush was keen to join with me as my chief creative officer, I thought, great, that's a great partnership from the outset to take on this role. If he and I can lock arms and do this, that's de-risking things quite considerably. So I suppose in terms of calculating odds, you kind of go, there are risks, but what are the ingredients that you can do to try and shorten those odds as much as possible? So that heaven forbid if it does go wrong, at least you can look back and go, well, I tried.
Brilliant.
Versus, or if you look back and go, well, why didn't I think of that before? So I think it's just trying to weigh up those different inputs and outputs.
Brilliant. To take us briefly to a different space, talk about creativity. So the future of creativity in the context of client-side pressures, the commercial reality of the world we know today, Gen AI. Well, my guess is you're quite optimistic, but there's some headwinds. So tell us a bit about your perspectives on the future of creativity.
Yes, I think it's the role of creativity, how creativity in communications manifests itself, how creativity in communications is gotten to, as you say, with Gen AI and cost pressure and the kind of fragmentation of channels. It's a very, very different industry from the one I started out on. And I think that's kind of in part the answer to that question. I think this is where creativity has got us be at its very strongest, in part to the industry itself and how we kind of reinvent ourselves and make sure that we are really, really relevant as a proposition for our clients. I think if we do that correctly, there's a absolute rightful role for agency creativity and the premium it should command. But to do that, we've got to make sure that we are bringing real relevance to that work, and however that manifests itself. The client pressures out there right now, the pressures on a CMO, on cost management, on budget pressure. As you say, the adoption of Gen AI, how best to use Gen AI. How do we use Gen AI to make the work better, not just commoditized? I think these are the things we've got to really, really work through, and those are hard. We don't know many answers to those. So there's a lot of the learning curve has never been steeper in that regard, and it can be scary because you are stepping into the unknown. So I think agencies again need to embrace that. And not bury their heads in the sand and try and kind of crave after yesteryear. I think this is the part now in the next kind of 1, 3, 5 years we've really got to try and reinvent ourselves, and hopefully create a new wave of creativity. I think the traditional way of how we measure ourselves in terms of the outputs and craft and film, and that needs we need to look at ourselves at that. So it's challenging, it's slightly frightening, but equally, I think, really a hugely exciting time for the industry.
That's a great summation of some of those challenges there, Bill. And what you just described, there were two words that struck in my mind as you were going through it. One was you mentioned the word proposition, and then you mentioned the word work. And typically in that context of advertising, work is that creative work that then comes forth. So yeah, we were having this conversation with Sir John Hegarty just a couple of weeks ago, and he had a little bit of a bee in his bonnet around the role of advertising more generally. And he used the example of Taylor Swift. And he basically said that, Taylor Swift has probably productized in the greatest of ways, right? Created an insane, intergenerational experience, whether it be live concerts or indeed her product more generally. And he felt that advertising needed to sort of almost evolve to be more holistic in the way that we think about proposition and the work, to move just beyond a pure comms lens. And I just wonder if you have a point of view as to how you see an agency model reshaping itself to kind of fulfill more of the P's than an advertising agency has traditionally done.
Oh, good question. Well, I'm not. I'd like to. I should listen back to John's interview around Taylor Swift, but no, I think how agencies beyond just building a media plan, and creating a series of assets which are clearly hugely important, very on point, carry our message to the world and reaching the audiences we need to reach. I think when you get to an idea that can be really permeate into culture and popular culture, a la Taylor Swift, and put a kind of bigger object into the world, then that's really interesting. And that arguably is something that that tech can do to an extent. But I think, when you can take an idea and capture hearts and minds and get that into the public discourse, into culture, that really is, that's when you're getting that real earned media. And agencies talk a lot about how the importance of culture is and how you tread your way into culture. And I think that's easier said than done, especially in today's, very, very fragmented environment. But I do think, there's how agencies can not just be creators, but curators in terms of taking things into the world and commissioning different forms of activity for clients' brands, and enable a brand and enable the client of a brand to be as multifaceted as possible in the way it manifests itself beyond just a media plan is quite an interesting task. And to that end, in terms of, I suppose, inputs and outputs, you've got to change your inputs in an agency to get to different outputs. So they're beyond the traditional inputs of creative teams and art directors and copywriters and design teams and what have you. I suppose part of then the opportunity is to bring different skill sets from very, very diverse and very different backgrounds to try and manifest creativity in very different spaces. So I think that's an interesting kind of exam question for agencies over the next couple of years.
I just want to add one more point to this, which we were chatting to Rory Sutherland a while ago now, in fact. And he was talking about sort of the changing nature of the agency model, and in particular, the business model that changes. And I think reflecting on the old school mentality of billing per hour, and actually, billing on a media plan, as you say, on a media buying process, and moving much more towards a consultative approach to the way that you onboard clients. And in fact, one of the big drivers or competitors of the traditional agency model is organizations like Accenture, for example, coming in with a different approach, a different lens on how it works, and things are integrated with Droga5 in that sense. And I'd love to get your take on how do you envisage the business model of agency land evolving as you're moving into this new landscape?
It's an existential question. I think for many years now, we've been trying to look at different commercial models beyond just the hours-based model. How do you value and create a different kind of commercial metric and kind of value equation for that for clients? I think we've constantly struggled on getting the right form of data and data modeling, and to be able to really calculate that value and that value added of an asset or a piece of thinking beyond just the hours. So I think that's something we've still got to work on. I think to do that as agencies, we've got to really earn the right with clients to be so commercially and intrinsically partner to their business, and I think that's hard these days. There's a lot of transience. There's a lot of movement, as we move away from, the more stable AOR retainer type model. It's more and more project based. And when it's more project based, that can arguably be even more difficult to get close. It can be quite transactional. It can be quite short term. So first of all, I think, how do you create that kind of long-term relationship? How do you grow your influence as an agency and into different areas? How do you take your creative thinking beyond just the comms plan and brand building, actually take that brand platform and tread it into other parts of the business? And then I think, part of then is then going as an agency and how do you really calculate a new asset value for clients on that in terms of the balance sheet and what it's driving in terms of the top line, but also hopefully bringing efficiencies to the bottom line. So I think there's some quite a lot of work to be done there. I don't have the answers, but it's a big exam question that we need to face into. And again, I think it takes a certain type of client to want to explore that as well. As I say, we've got to earn the right to be that trusted advisor and that trusted partner to that client. If we're going to take a long-term view on a different kind of economic modeling for a relationship, then that takes investment and time. And often in this environment, clients don't have that time. There's a huge amount of pressure.
Very difficult, very difficult. I'm going to lift us up out of advertising creativity specifically back to something you said about the overnight test. So part of why Richard and I do what we do is to help people to navigate, make good decisions, and so on. And I don't think we've ever talked about the overnight test. And it might be seen as a cliche, but it isn't. And if I think personally, I've probably written, I don't know, 20 really, really, really important emails through my life and half of them I've never sent because I will sleep on them. So my practice is to manifest my thinking in an email and then look at it in the morning. Jesus, I can't send that. Or yeah, I have to send that. So tell us a bit about what is your practice, your approach to the overnight test, and maybe one decision, either where you talked yourself into something or out of something, just to give a bit of a handle on. This is a real thing. This isn't just a cliche. It's a real thing.
No, I think in the multitude of your of bombardment of issues or messages or emails that come into your inbox on any given day, there's always little bombs that are going off. And often, I suppose, in agency leadership and as CEO, the buck stops with you. You become a point of escalation, whether it's a phone call from a client, whether it's an issue on talent. There's can be some pretty scary moments. And your instinct at first, if you care deeply, which I do, that can be quite scary. You can quickly go to almost catastrophizing what's going on here, and how on earth are we going to cope with this? And you start role playing the consequences. Oh my God, are we going to get fired from this client? Oh my, if we leave that fired, we're going to lose that amount of revenue. Oh my God, what's that going to do in terms of our plan? Oh my God, that's going to have implications in terms of cost. So you can quickly serialize the consequences, which only adds pressure. And so I suppose trying to create a mechanism by which you can give yourself decompress a little bit to take the pressure and the heat out of that kind of moment. It is that cliche, a problem shared is a problem halved. As soon as you get that, you go, right, who is your wingman or wing person that you can quickly share that with, whether it's your partner CSO, or team in the agency, so you can quickly share that. But there are times where after that kind of day, it's a long walk home, and you're kind of internalizing all the consequences. You'll come home from dinner, you're distracted, you're thinking about it, and then you can start, as you say, Mark, writing the emails. You can start rushing out the issues and go, right, this is what we need to do. But I often, the overnight test, I kind of, and time, is how you get perspective. How do you kind of, create a framework for perspective on these things? And rather than just looking at it as one huge problem, and all the, terrible consequences that it could manifest itself, is start breaking it down to a series of smaller problems, one step at a time, in terms of how you can grapple control of the issue. And that's not, you're not going to solve it overnight. You're not going to solve it in days. Probably it's going to be a series of issues. But I think if you can do that, enables you to feel like you're taking control of things, or doing it on terms by which you feel that you can be progressive about that. So look, it's easier said than done. There are times, I'm sure, if you ask my wife, and I've got a face of thunder and my weekend's all completely distracted. But I think if you can do that, it can often pay dividends.
I love that. Well, this time has gone by in an absolute flash. It's been such an intriguing conversation, meandering into so many different areas. But I'll end perhaps with the last question then, which, you've worked on so many pieces of great advertising. And I just wonder if you could perhaps recall maybe one that stood out for you as being perhaps the most memorable, and something maybe the most enjoyable or even impactful that you've worked on that stays in your mind.
Well, actually, I'm very grateful for, and then one of the very reasons I joined this industry and was inspired to join this industry is doing great work. And I suppose if one else to look at my career reel, I've been very, very fortunate to work with some amazing clients. I worked with Audi for 7 years here in the UK when we were doing a series of car launches, and I look back at that chapter, and certainly some work there, whether it's the launch of the R8, and we had a car set and the XL Centre skating on ice, and cars were driving through all these kind of smash up cars, and the ambition of that was just so audacious. I look back with very, very fond memories on some of the work we did on Audi. At Droga5, we've done some phenomenal work over the years for Amazon, for Barclaycard, across so many clients. That's work that's made me laugh so hard and made me incredibly proud. But weirdly, I think if I was to look at one of the most kind of iconic bits of work in my career, is slightly, it didn't trouble any juries. In fact, it created notoriety for very different reasons, which is for Sunny Delight. And back in the day, Sunny Delight took the market by storm. It was a genius bit of product distribution. It was being sold in a chiller cabinet in supermarkets, in the fridge aisle, if you like. So, it was being perceived as a fresh orange juice. Unfortunately, it only had 5% orange juice. And the line was the great stuff kids go for. So there was this kind of insight. It's actually targeting mums buying this drink for their kids. It was full of vitamins A, B, C, and D. And it was very much targeting the competitive constructs of purple stuff, Ribena, and black stuff, Coca-Cola. And it took the market by storm. And we had a very clear kind of creative campaign construct where kids would run home from school and they'd run to the fridge and open it up. And you'll say, oh, what should we have for drink? Oh, we can have this purple stuff? No. Black stuff? No. Oh, let's try this new Sunny Delight. And then the kids would cut to the drink shots. And then, one of the kids could be overheard saying, oh, your mum's great. This is such a lovely drink. And mum would overhear that and kind of give a wink to camera and walk away. Sunny Delight, the great stuff kids go for. And at the time, Coca-Cola was doing their lovely Christmas ad. Holidays are coming. Santa's lorry comes into a big village. And the marketing director said, well, we need a Christmas ad. We need our own version of our kind of Sunny Delight Christmas magic. Great brief, let's go for it. But still within the constructs of this kind of choice shot that the kids had. So we came up with this charming little film whereby, you open on a beautiful fairy tale village snow scene, and there's 3 snowmen. And in the middle of the night, these snowmen come to life. They go into the kitchen, whispering around, looking at the choice shots, the choices, and they grab the Sunny Delight. You cut to the morning, the family come out, and they've all turned orange because they've been drinking the Sunny Delight. And you go, okay, that's all good until we have the PPM, and the client pulled us to one side and said, small thing. We've noticed that, and we've had certain complaints that children who are drinking a lot of this Sunny Delight, because of the beta carotene in this drink, it's turning kids orange. It's a bit like tomato soup. There's a huge amount of beta carotene. So kids are drinking a liter and a half of this stuff, and actually it's turning their skin orange. And we're like going, well, this isn't good. we surely can't make this script. We go, no, it's all fine. Carry on. Press relations take care of it. Cut to make the film, put it out on air, and then obviously, the headline cut to the headlines. Sunny's like the great stuff that kids that turns kids orange. It got into the press for the wrong reasons. But it was a moment of I look back at that, and it was a very, very effective campaign. It was one of the most successful campaigns for a drinks launch. But that anecdote will always stay with me.
Well, notoriety comes in many forms, but it's for me to close, Bill, just to say thank you for your time and insights today. You talked a bit about honesty and caring, and I think that's what really shines through in terms of my impression of you, which is not new. I know this of you, but there is an honesty and an integrity about your approach and everything you do, and it's very clear you do care a lot. And so we are very grateful. Thank you for your time. I know it'll be very useful to many people thinking about the big questions in life. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, that's been very, very enjoyable. So I really appreciate you inviting me along.